Our first story for tonight. Someone tried to break into my house and they knew my identity. What should I do? This all started a couple days ago, July 5th, where I'd get a random call from FedEx around 10 p.m. where they would ask me for my name and address, which they already knew. I gave it to them thinking it might be a package that was lost and somehow found its way back to my home. Hindsight, I should have known FedEx doesn't deliver past 8 p.m. here in Canada. I thought nothing of it till I got another phone call saying they can't find my unit number and asked me to come out to the roundabout nearby my place. My dad thought it was weird, so he patrolled the area to find these people. My dad did around 4 laps. The first lap there wasn't anything there, but then I got curious and joined him for the second lap. Yet again, nothing. I went back into my home and my dad did a third lap around the house. He found a gray SUV in the corner and confronted them. They told my dad they aren't the delivery person, and my dad left to do another confirmation check. As he was doing this last lap, that same SUV wasn't there. The next day, July 6th, around 6 p.m., 11 p.m., we hear a doorbell ringing, and I went down to check, and it was 2 individuals around the ages of 20. They knew my name and was calling out for me. I thought it was weird because I've never seen them before. I didn't feel safe, so I didn't pursue them. They kept coming over and over again, so we called the police and talked about what we should do. The cops told me to contact them if this happens again. The next day, July 7th, it was very quiet and nothing weird happened, so we thought the worst has ended and just went on with my day. The next day, July 8th, it was the same quietness, but when the time approached 11 p.m., my security camera spotted an individual with a mask on taking photo video of my current house. This was the breaking point. We contacted the police and informed them about this weird behavior. Just when you thought it was over, I was casually in the living room around 3 a.m. the same day, July 8th. I heard something thunking outside my balcony. I thought it could be anything and didn't mind it till it thunked again. I went to the balcony, go see what I was hearing, then it clicked. I thumb by the door. Eddie was face to face with the intruder. I started screaming for help, and my family came down to check out the commotion. Thank God I checked the balcony that day. Who knows what else could have happened. Today is July 9th, and I haven't got a wink of sleep in thinking of the terror that I faced. Am I one of the targets of a home invasion? How did they get my name? What do they want from me? Update. The situation has calmed down and the police are on the report. Currently at an Airbnb until the construction is finished. Thanks for those who worried. But our second story for tonight is no less chilling. It's how I survived a house invasion. This story happened more than 10 years ago, when I was still a student. It has a few graphic details of animal harm and graphic violence, so discretion is advised. A bit of backstory. As with most students, I was always broke and had a few ventures apart from my part-time job to bring me extra money. One of them was house and pet sitting. I have always had a love for animals, so when this couple contacted me to ask to house sit for them for the last few days before they returned from their overseas trip, as the last sitter has bailed on them and their 6-month-old golden retriever puppy would be alone, I jumped at the opportunity. The fact that they promised to pay me the full 2-week fee for staying there less than a week made it just more appealing. Little did I know how bad it would turn out. I got the details, got the keys from the agent, and headed over to the house as it was already after 5 p.m. and almost dark as it was early spring. I got to the house, which was a really nice place, but it bordered a not-so-good area that was and still is prone to crime. House break-ins, robberies, etc. It did not bother me much cause nothing will happen to me. I know. Young and naive. The first 4 nights went without a hitch. Watching movies, jacuzzi, and just generally enjoying myself. The owners would have returned on the 5th day, fairly late at night. I went over to check on the doggo. I got a call from them about 10 p.m. saying their flight got delayed. They are going to stay in a hotel and do the 3-1-hour drive back the following morning, and asked if I could sleep there again that night. Which was fine. I was already there and had my overnight bag still in my car. I called my dad to let him know of the plans, as I was still staying with my parents, and he specifically asked what the address was. I normally did not give them details like that, because I was old enough to look after myself. I still believe to this day that that probably saved my life. I eventually got to bed about 1 a.m., and it felt like I have only slept 5 minutes when I was awoken to a window breaking, and I could hear movement and what sounded like footsteps running down the hallway. The first thing I did was grab my phone and just hit redial, thanks to my old Motorola phone. Redialing was as simple as pressing one button, as my dad was the last number that I had called, hoping that he wakes up from the call. I then dropped the phone in between the headboard and mattress in case my dad picks up that he can hear what is going on. I had barely done that when the first guy stormed through the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette, and he had a knife in his hand. When he saw me, he raised it and came at me. Now, one thing to those that is unfamiliar with South Africa and the crime is that robberies and house invasions usually are very brutal and violent. People get murdered or tortured if they in the slightest retaliate or not cooperate with the robbers. Out of instinct, I raised my legs back when he came at me, and when he came within reach, I kicked both legs out as hard as I can. Now, I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'3", and at that stage, I weighed about 100 kg, or 220 pounds, and I was fit and strong. My time not spent at the uni or work was at the gym. I could do an easy 250-pound bench, 350-pound squat that day. When I kicked and made contact with the guy, he completely lifted off the ground and shot into the wall. Luckily, the knife shot out of his hand as well. Before he got the chance to get up, I was on top of him, driving my right knee into his face, and in return, his head into the wall. I knew that my life depended on it, so I put in some extra force. The guy dropped like a sack of potatoes. But before I could get up, I heard the sound of a pistol cock, and I froze. It felt like all the blood drained from my body and I became just numb. I remember the only thing that went through my head was that if he shot me, that I would rather die than be disabled or dependent on other people that will have to take care of me. He stood like that with the pistol against my head for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 10 seconds. I did not move, and he eventually said in very broken English to get on the bed face down. I panicked, but thought if he wanted to shoot me, that he already would have done so. So I did it as he said. He threw a blanket over me, and I turned into a fetal position with my back against the wall, just so if they wanted to stab me that I had my legs and arms in front to protect my body. Now by that time, I had forgotten that I had called my dad, and the guy that I had kneed is still down. I heard a third guy come into the room, and I could hear what sounded like Portuguese to me. I could not understand what they said, but I recognized it, as we used to go to Mozambique on holiday a lot, and that is the main language spoken there. The one guy tried to get the guy that I put down off the ground, while the other started to ransack the house, shoving valuables into a big bag. It was about at this time that I heard tires screeching and a car approaching at what sounded like Mach 1. The car skidded to a halt right in front of the gate, and I heard someone scream. It was my dad. The three inside the house panicked and ran out the back door and tried to jump the fence. My dad opened fire, shooting in their general direction. Now I know my dad missed them on purpose, cause if he wanted to hit them, he would, as he is not one of, but the best shot that I know. And I'm not just saying that cause he is my dad. He is ex-Army Special Forces, or Rexies for those in the know, represented SA in the Clay Pigeon World Championships a couple of years, has various regional pistol and rifle championship titles, and is a gunsmith by occupation. I have seen him hit golf balls at fifth down with his pistol. Politics and the racial situation in the country would have had him in big trouble had he hit one of them. I grabbed the house keys and pressed the gate remote, and my dad called the police while he came in. I met him at the front door, and we walked out to the car to wait there for the police. It took them over an hour to get there. Some excuse of no vehicle available. By that time, I had calmed down and started to look for the dog. I could not find her anywhere. I grabbed a flashlight from my dad and started scanning the surrounding yard, and as I got to the corner, I could see her laying on the ground. I got to her and saw she was dead. Later autopsies revealed she was poisoned, and the police found pieces of meat laced with poison near the fence. Poisoning is pretty standard practice in my country for dealing with dogs at a house or area that is targeted for a break-in or robbery. I was fuming and so sad. The police was also pretty useless and had a don't give a shit attitude and barely took our statements. By that time it was starting to get light, and I retrieved my bag, phone, and locked the house as good as I can without touching anything, and drove home behind my dad. Only when I got home I got the story from my dad's side. He said he answered my call, only to hear the shouting and what sounded like fighting going on. And when I did not respond, he flew out of the house and raced over. Luckily, he asked me for the address the previous night, and he knows the area well to know exactly which house it is. Now, my dad got there pretty quickly, and he said he stayed on the line the whole time, only hanging up when he stopped at the gate. My parents' house is about 10 km 6 miles from there, through a residential area. It's normally about a 20-minute drive. The call duration was 7 min, 13 seconds. That'd be. I met the detective there later that day, gave my statement, they took fingerprints, etc., and the owners got back about the same time. The rest of the day was a blur, as I came down from the shock and adrenaline. Now, that is not where the story ends. About 7 or 8 months later, I got a call from the detective, telling me they caught the guys, and I must come to a lineup to point them out. I specifically told her that I did not see any of their faces, as it was dark, and after the guy held the gun against my head, I was under the blanket and did not see anything. She assured me that they caught them on fingerprints and will show them to me beforehand, which might not be the ethically correct way to do it, but they wanted to have as much evidence as possible against them. You will understand why in a minute. I got to the police station, and unlike you see in the movies, there is no one-way glass or separate room. They bring the 3 guys into the room and make them stand against the wall. The one, which I was later told was the leader, which was the one that I had need, looked at me with so much hate as I had never seen in my life. He had the eyes of someone that would slit your throat and not blink an eye. His name was Joseph Dragon Sambo Dai. He pulled his hand up to his neck and made the slit my throat gesture. You know which one I mean. We left the room, and the detective gave me a copy of his rap sheet. Amongst others, 4 counts of murder, I think 8-9 for attempted murder, multiple assault, aggravated assault, over 100 of housebreak and robbery, rape. Rape? I was shocked. The detective told me that had I not taken him out first and fast that night, I would have definitely not gotten away so lightly. Now, this is also not where the story ends. 3 days later, I get another call from the detective, saying that I should be careful, as he had escaped from custody, and they have not caught him yet. I was not worried too much, as the robbery wasn't at my house, and I had changed cars, so he probably could not find me. Also, I got my firearm license and carried my pistol on me 24/7. I did not hear anything after that, until about 2 years later, when I saw the detective in the grocery shop. We started talking about the case, and she told me that he was killed during a home invasion. He broke into the wrong house, and the owner was waiting for him, pistol in hand. Shot him one in the stomach and one in the neck. And thanks to the slow response time of emergency services and police, he bled out on the guy's living room floor, ridding society of a piece of human garbage. I want to add a bit of info to this. All 3 that were caught were Mozambican nationals, undocumented and no fingerprints or ID in the system, essentially illegal immigrants. And it is of opinion in NSA that more than 70% of all violent crime is done by illegal immigrants, mainly Mozambican, Zimbabwean, and Nigerian descent. It makes it fairly easy, because none of those countries have extradition to SA, so if it gets too hot, they just flee back over the border and nothing can be done to them. This whole ordeal has made me more vigilant, heightened my situational awareness, and made me a little paranoid to double and triple check all doors, locks, etc. Also, thanks to my heightened situational awareness, has allowed me to remove myself from a few potential dangerous situations in the years after the incident. But it has also robbed me of my peace of mind. I have since immigrated to a safer country, but I still sometimes wake up at night if I hear a noise. So to keep up with tradition, Joseph, we will never meet again as you have passed. But to his cronies or anyone that wants to try something similar, please do pay me a visit. I will arrange your swiftly departure and reunion with Joseph in hell. And to Joseph, I hope you died in agony for poisoning Daisy. My. Our third story is called Home Invasion. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story that I never really tell anymore, because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make well-meaning comments about what I should have done in this situation, without really understanding how differently your mind works when you're experiencing absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it. So, here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in the 5 years since this day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started earlier in the day before work. My front door opened and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early and I was happily called out to him. "I'm in here, love." I was met with silence and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something is wrong crawl up my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply hadn't heard me, and walked out into my living room kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than me. I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this moment, and was just standing there, staring at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if he'd maybe walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave. But as he continued to stare, I realized I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed up my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, and used a loud, clear voice telling him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business being here. He completely ignored me, like I hadn't spoken. Then he began to pick up my things. My cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still had about 12-15 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he could reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move after me, and I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go and put 2 locked doors between us, my bathroom door and the closest door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message, pleading with him to call 911 and tell them there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break that door down too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on how I should have acted. But all I can tell you is that I was frozen. With fear, with shock, I don't know. But I didn't scream, or cry, or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace the door, or try to hold it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and waited to die, because I just knew that's what was going to happen. People like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come to help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt if I swung it at someone. Why didn't I do anything? I don't really have an answer for that. But the closet door, miraculously, held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back out into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator and cabinets being flung open as things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying, wanting to leave but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived a 15 hours drive away, and told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort, and to tell her how much I love her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing her daughter was in danger, and there was nothing she could do to help. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers I loved them, to help my husband through whatever happened next if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband, shouting for me. The intruder walked out toward the living room kitchen area again, where my front door was located, and I opened the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with him, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling, at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. This entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filled with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that. But from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time officers arrived, it was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just always seemed like this was an unusually long response time for a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report, telling them what happened. One of the officers commented that I should really keep my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being insensitive at the time, or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen this situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was over. But I've carried the fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Please consider continuing, because this isn't all doom and gloom. If this or something similar has happened to you, and you're still struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the laying awake, listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant checking and rechecking your locks, this is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex and chose a third-floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for the neighborhood, finding that an isolated incidence of car theft was the only thing reported in decades. I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in the same apartment in Memphis, but my husband often works night shifts now, and I simply couldn't continue being terrified to sleep at night. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything other than locking my door, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough, or having a door hold long enough to save me. And that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started talking classes. At first I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who is both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference it has made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closest doesn't exist. I am confident. I am strong. I am worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I no longer am ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I'm safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid, and however you decide to cope with your own story is the right choice for you. This is how I happen to do it, and it's worked well for me. Thank you again for listening. I'm a little afraid to share this because I'm not sure how people will respond, but maybe doing so will help someone else that's feeling alone with this. If anyone is struggling with their own story and wants a kind ear to listen, I'm here. Awesome. And our fourth and last story for this spooky night is a near-home invasion while staying alone. 21 female. I'll be the first to admit that I have a very can't happen to me complex. And that's kind of what occurred in this story. I'm a university student and live in a rental house with 5 other people. It is far from ideal, but in this housing outcry that we're living in, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month to exist in a box. This has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 of the roommates I had were all out for the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with the volume loud, taking the long-ass showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc. It was around 10 p.m. I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like there was something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on our porch, so I assumed that to be the case. After hearing some fumbling the second time, I went over to check through the window. There was nothing there. As I'm turning to head back to the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window. I didn't know it was cement at the time, but not important. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized control of me again, and I locked the door back. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was still locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time, my grandma's words came into my head about something her own mother had told her. If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. I shut the lights off in the living room and managed to turn the TV off, which was hard because my hands were shaking. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonating at this time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom, roast me if you want, and had turned all of the lights out in the house as I passed them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. Don't know if there was more than one person, or if they realized they couldn't jump the fence to get into the backyard. While calling for emergency services on speaker, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know that's probably one of the most Canadian things I could say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark holding my makeshift spear for what was probably about 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't being murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me police were coming, which they eventually did. Took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs, and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would have had to come in and physically pull me out the room. Statement was given, but that's all they did. Literally, all they did. Literally all they did. Nothing else. Literally that. A very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the rest of the weekend. So shout out to Officer Cutie with the tattoos! I made an appointment with a doctor to get out on anxiety medicine, as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in any physical danger at that point, but I've had some very charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was just finding it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but I'm human. Meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house with wall-to-wall people again. And honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. Please have a fun, safe weekend.